I still remember the sound of my father's boots crunching in the snow, the way he didn't look back. He dragged me for miles through those tangled woods, fingers tight around the rope that burned my wrists raw. He didn't say a word after. That last slap. Just grunted and kept his eyes on the path like I was nothing more than the mule he once beat half to death for stumbling in a gopher hole. At 17, I should have known what was coming, but I held on to hope like a fool. The cabin was a squat thing, logs dark with age, half buried in drifts. Smoke rose thin from a crooked chimney, and inside waited the man I was meant to belong to now. My father didn't bother to knock. He just threw the door open and yanked me through, shoving me forward like livestock. The man, Rurk, they called. Him, barely blinked. He stood tall, thick-shouldered, with a beard wild as the pines. His eyes were the only thing that moved, and they flicked from me to my father and back again. "She's yours," my father spat, tossing a bundle of feed on the floor. "Done with her." He turned, heavy with the silence of a man who never wanted a daughter, especially not one swollen with shame. My shame. His shame. No one asked who the father was. No one cared. Rurk's face was blank, hard as winter ground. He nodded once, and my father left without a backward glance. The wind slammed the door behind him. I stood there, wrists aching, cheeks still hot from the slap. I stared at the rough boards under my bare feet, trying not to tremble. Rurk didn't move, didn't speak, just watched me, like he was weighing a deer to see if it was worth the bullet. I waited for anger, for fists or shouts. Instead, Rurk turned away and pointed to the cot in the corner. His voice, when it finally came, was gravel scraping out from years of disuse. "Food's in the pot, water in the barrel. Don't touch my traps." That was it. He crossed to the window, peered out into the white silence, and ignored me as thoroughly as if I were a shadow. I sank onto the cot, clutching my belly, my whole body shaking. The child inside me was all I had left, my only kin, my only reason. I pressed a hand to my stomach, whispering promises I didn't know how to keep. We'd survive. I'd keep us alive, even if it meant living like a ghost in Rurk's world. The first night I barely slept. Every sound, the crack of the fire, Rurk's boots on the floor, the distant howl of wolves set my nerves on edge. Hunger gnawed at me, but I dared not take more than a ladleful from the pot. In the morning, Rurk was gone before the sun rose. He left me alone in that cold cabin, as if testing whether I'd run. But I didn't run. I waited, quiet as a mouse, gathering the courage to face whatever came next. Days blurred. I cleaned, hauled water, mended what I could, all in silence. Rurk returned each night with meat or fish, wordless, sometimes tossing me a glance that was more assessment than concern. If he noticed my limp or the way I winced when I stretched, he gave no sign. We were strangers, both of us carrying wounds. Nobody could see. It was loneliness that bit hardest. The weight of abandonment pressed down with every hour. But I watched Rurk, and he watched me. Two ghosts circling the same fire, neither sure who'd flinch first. I decided then, I wouldn't break. I'd survive for me and the child, even if it meant never speaking, never being more than another burden. The silence between us was like another set of walls around that cabin. Rurk would rise before dawn, slip into the snow without a word, and return long after the shadows stretched across the floorboards. He never asked me to cook, yet. I did. Never asked me to clean, yet I did that too. It wasn't duty, it was survival. If I didn't keep busy, the weight of being cast out would crush me whole. At night, I'd lie stiff on the cot, listening to him breathe in the chair by the fire. The man didn't snore, didn't stir. Just sat as if sleep had no claim on him. His silence gnawed at me more than cruelty ever could. At least cruelty had sound. Shouts, fists, the sharp slap of leather. Silence left me alone with my thoughts. and those were worse. Then one morning, it happened. I was bending to lift a pail from the barrel when pain ripped through me. At first I thought it was just the strain of chores, but when I glanced down I saw it, the smear of red against the snow. My heart stopped. The baby? I staggered inside, clutching my belly, hands trembling so hard I nearly dropped the pail. "Please, no," I whispered to the little life within me, the only soul in the world that hadn't turned its back. I sank to the floor, gasping, the room spinning. Rurk found me there. He froze in the doorway, snow crusted on his coat, a rabbit dangling limp in his hand. His eyes darted to the blood on the floor, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw something pierce that stone face: fear. He dropped the rabbit, crossed the room in 2 strides, and knelt beside me. "What happened?" His voice was rough, hurried, alive. I think I'm losing the baby," I choked out. The words cracked something in me, the dam breaking. I sobbed, clutching his sleeve like it was the only rope left to hold. For a heartbeat, he looked stricken. Then his hands, those hands that could skin a deer in minutes, grew gentle. He lifted me onto the cot, tucked blankets around me, and pressed a cup of warm water into my hands. "Breathe," he muttered, voice low, steady. "Don't move more than you must." All night he stayed by my side, tending the fire, cooling my fevered face with damp cloths. When the pains came sharp, I cried out, and he held my hand. Awkward, clumsy, but he didn't let go. His thumb brushed the rope burns still scarring my wrist, and he flinched like the mark burned him too. By dawn, the bleeding slowed. My body, weary but stubborn, clung to the child. Hope, my hope, still stirred faintly within. Relief washed over me in a tide that left me trembling. Rurk sat back, shoulders sagging, eyes bloodshot from a night without rest. He hadn't spoken much, but he didn't need to. In his silence, there'd been care. A rough, unexpected tenderness that set him apart from every cruel hand I'd known. When I tried to thank him, my voice barely a whisper, he only shook his head. Rest. And for the first time since being dragged to that cabin, I let myself close my eyes with a fragile sense of safety. The silence between us had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was holding something fragile. A truce. A chance. The blizzard rolled in like a beast with no master. One moment the sky was gray. The next it was a wall of white, swallowing the mountain whole. Snow battered the windows, howled through the cracks, and buried the world outside in silence so thick it made the cabin feel like the last place on earth. Days blurred. Rurk rationed meat and firewood, his jaw locked tight as he measured portions, like every bite might be our last. I tried to help, fetching water, tending the fire, but clumsiness dogged me. My belly was heavy now, my back always aching. Still, I wanted to prove I wasn't dead weight. That's when it happened. I was reaching for a bucket near the hearth when my foot slipped on the wet stone. I went down hard. Pain shot through my ankle, sharp and hot. I bit back a cry, but the noise still escaped. Rurk spun, faster than I thought a man his size could move. He hauled me upright, his face storm dark. For a moment I thought anger would come, the kind I'd been taught to. Brace for. Instead I saw something else. Panic. He eased me onto the cot, his rough hands probing the swollen joint with a gentleness that startled me. "You'll make it worse, pushing yourself like that," he muttered. His voice carried no rage, only something rawer, quieter. Tears sprang to my eyes, unbidden. I just wanted to help. The words cracked out of me before I could stop them, laced with all the years of being told I was nothing but a burden. Rurk's hand stilled. His eyes met mine, steady, burning. "I'm not your father," The words struck deeper than any slap. My chest ached, breath-catching. No man had ever said that to me, not in defiance, not in reassurance, just fact. He reached for a strip of cloth, wrapped my ankle with care, and when my tears spilled over, he didn't look away. He didn't shame me for them. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin something shifted. He sat beside me on the cot, bandaging with awkward focus, like he was building something delicate. My walls, the ones I'd built to keep every man, out, cracked just enough to let him in. When he finished, he leaned back, rubbing his scarred hands on his thighs. His beard bristled as he sighed, weary, like words cost him more than blood. "You're not weak for hurting. Weak is walking away." His gaze flicked to the window, where snow piled higher, and I knew he wasn't speaking of me alone. I studied him through blurred eyes, the man who had barely spoken since I'd been left here. He wasn't gentle by nature. He was forged by the same wilderness that now tried to starve us. But that night, when he handed me a bowl of broth and sat by the fire, I saw more than a keeper of silence. I saw someone carrying his own wounds, his own ghosts. I didn't thank him aloud. I couldn't, not yet. But when he shifted closer to feed the fire, I let my shoulder brush his. Just barely. Vulnerability, offered like a seed in frozen ground. The storm outside roared on, but for the first time I didn't feel trapped. I felt seen. The storm broke, but the mountain was never merciful for long. Weeks of cold gnawed at us, and I grew heavier with each day. My belly stretched, my back ached, and sometimes I wondered if my body would give out before the child had a chance to take its first breath. It was then the fever came. It started small, chills, a burning in my throat. But by the second night, I was shaking so hard the cot creaked beneath me. Sweat drenched the blankets, my skin blistering with heat even as snow piled against the door. I tried to hide it, afraid that weakness would make me useless to him. But when I coughed blood into my hand, Rurk knew. He didn't hesitate. He bundled himself in his coat, strapped on snowshoes, and slipped into the night without a word. I remember reaching for him, whispering not to go, but he was already gone, swallowed by the storm. The hours after that stretched endless. My thoughts spiraled. If he never came back, I'd die here. The baby would die with me. I drifted in and out of consciousness, fever dreams tangling with memory. My father's face red with rage, my mother's silence, ropes biting my wrists, and then somewhere in the haze the sound of boots at the door. Rurk stumbled inside, half frozen, his face carved by wind and ice. His hands shook as he pulled a pouch from his coat. Herbs, roots, something he must have bargained from trappers, or dug out from beneath the snow at risk of his life. He boiled them into a bitter tea and coaxed it past my lips. His hands were cracked and bleeding, but they held the cup steady. "Drink," he urged, his voice thick, raw. I gagged on the taste, but obeyed, and slowly, over the next day, the fever broke. I woke to find clean blankets tucked around me, my boots mended and drying near the fire, and small wooden figures lined along the windowsill. Animals he must have carved while watching me fight for breath. When I finally found the strength to whisper, my voice rasped like dry grass. "Why?" Rurk was at the hearth, turning a rabbit on the spit. He didn't look at me when he answered. "Because I ain't him," that was all. No speech, no promises. Just those words, heavy with a meaning I wasn't ready to unpack. He'd risked his life for mine and the child's. He'd tended me with a care my own blood had never given. And all he wanted me to know was that he wasn't my father. I lay back, staring at the carved animals, my chest tight. For the first time, I let myself believe there might be more than survival waiting here. More than silence, maybe even something like belonging. The fear still lingered, yes. But as I pulled the blanket tighter around me and pressed a hand to The swell of my belly. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't known in years. Hope. The baby came on a night when the wind rattled the shutters like bones in a drum. My body seized with pain sharper than anything I'd ever known, waves that rolled through me until I thought I'd be torn in two. I bit the blanket to keep from screaming, but Rurk was there, steady as the mountains outside. He boiled water, ripped clean cloths, and knelt beside me, his rough hands unshaking even as my own trembled. Hours passed in agony, sweat soaking my hair, my throat raw from gasping. I cursed, prayed, begged, all of it blurring together. And then, in the thin, hours before dawn, a cry split the cabin. High, raw, desperate. My heart nearly stopped. Rurk lifted the tiny bundle, his big hands cradling her as if she were glass. His beard glistened with sweat, his chest rising heavy as though he'd endured the labor himself. He wrapped her in cloth, and when he placed her in my arms, I saw her face, red, squalling, perfect. I named her Hope before the sun rose because that's what she was, my hope. For a while, the world shrank to her soft cries, her rooting mouth, the feel of her small chest rising against mine. Rurk never said the word family, but he didn't need to. He carved a cradle from pine, lined it with furs, and stood watch through the nights while I slept. In his silence, he claimed us as his own. It was weeks later when a knock came at the cabin door, a sound so foreign I nearly dropped the child. Rurk rose with his rifle, jaw tight, and cracked the door. On the porch stood a figure half buried in snow, hat pulled low. When he lifted his face, I gasped. Seth, my brother. He looked older than his 20 years, jaw sharper, eyes harder. But I knew him. He rushed inside, pulling me into an embrace, so tight I thought I'd break. Tears stung my eyes, hope squirming between us. You're alive, he whispered. Mama's sick, June. She doesn't have much time. She needs to see you. The words cut deep. My mother, the woman who'd stayed silent while father dragged me away, was dying. And yet, despite the betrayal, my chest ached with longing. Blood still called. Seth's eyes flicked to Rurk, then to the cradle. And this? My daughter, I said, my voice firm. Hope squirmed, and I held her tighter. The room felt heavy with choice. The past clawed at me, asking if I'd come. Back. Face the town. Face father. But the present was here, Rurk's steady presence, the cabin that had become home, the fragile life I'd brought into it. I kissed Hope's forehead, heart torn. I'll go see Mama, I whispered. But this... I looked around, at Rurk by the fire, at the cradle, at the small tokens of care stitched into every corner of the room. This is home. I'm not running anymore. Rurk said nothing, but his hand brushed the back of mine as he passed, and it was enough. The town looked smaller than I remembered, though maybe it was me who had changed. I carried Hope close to my chest, Seth at my side, and Rurk just behind, broad, silent, the kind of man who drew stares without needing to speak. Whispers followed us down the street, but I kept my chin high. I wasn't the broken girl who'd been dragged out of here. I was a mother now, and I had something worth protecting. At my mother's bedside, years of anger tangled with grief. She was frail, her hands like paper, her breath shallow. When she saw me, tears welled in her clouded eyes. June, she whispered, voice cracking. I tried to stop him. I wanted to hate her for the silence, but all I saw was a woman worn down by the same man who'd broken me. I held her hand, whispered forgiveness I didn't fully understand, and watched her slip away that same night. But peace didn't last. Word spread that I was back, and with it came trouble. The preacher's son, once the favored boy of the town, now a man who carried himself like he owned it, cornered me outside the church. His eyes lingered too long on Hope, and a chill ran through me. "You don't belong here," he sneered. "Some stains don't wash clean." Before I could answer, Rurk stepped forward. His shadow fell over the man like a storm cloud. "She's not alone." His voice was low, steady, and final. The preacher's son spat in the snow and slunk off, but I knew it wasn't finished. That night the marshal came knocking, a man with tired eyes and a badge that had seen too much. "There's talk," he warned. "Your father's gone to ground, but he'll come back. And that preacher's boy? He ain't just full of talk. Folks like him don't take kindly to women finding their own place." The words proved true sooner than I expected. They came at dawn, shadows moving between the houses, men with torches and clubs, faces I half recognized from the past. They shouted for me to come out, to take my bastard and leave. I stood at the window, heart pounding, clutching Hope tight. For years I'd run, cowered, obeyed, but not now. Not with Seth beside me, trembling but standing tall, and Rurk at the door, rifle steady in his hands. "I won't run," I whispered. My voice shook, but my feet did not. Not again. Rurk glanced at me, and for once, words weren't necessary. He gave a single nod, his jaw set. Seth swallowed hard, gripped the old axe he carried, and moved to stand beside him. My brother. No. Longer just a boy, ready to fight. When the first man lunged, the fight was quick, brutal. Rurk's rifle cracked through the morning air, scattering the bravest of them. Seth swung his axe with wild courage, driving back the ones who tried to circle. I shouted, screamed, my fear transmuting into fury. For once I wasn't praying for escape. I was demanding the right to remain. When the smoke cleared, the yard was scattered with broken torches, blood in the snow, and silence that felt like victory. The attackers fled, leaving behind the truth. They couldn't scare me away anymore. I stood in that doorway, hope wailing in my arms, and felt something solid in my chest. We weren't just surviving. We were claiming our place. And no man, not my father, not the preacher's son, not anyone, would take it from us again. The town never quite looked at me the same after that morning. Some with fear, some with respect. Most with whispers trailing after me like smoke. But I didn't flinch from it. I walked the street with Hope on my hip and Seth at my side, and Rurk just a step behind, his steady presence saying what words never could. I belonged. Time passed, in seasons. Snow melted, the mountain bloomed, and for the first time in my life I tasted something close to peace. Seth worked odd jobs, his shoulders hardening, his eyes learning steadiness where once they'd only known fear. Hope grew strong, her laugh ringing through the cabin brighter than any bird song. And Rurk, he remained a man of few words, but every silence between us was fuller now, warmed by trust. It was in the thaw of spring that he placed something in my palm, a ring carved from bone, smooth as river stone. His eyes didn't meet mine when he said simply, "You're my family." My throat closed, tears blurring my sight, and all I could do was nod. But peace has a way of testing itself. A sheriff rode up the mountain one summer, dust thick on, his coat. He tipped his hat, his gaze wary. "Ma'am," he said, "we need your word. Other girls, other daughters were taken same as you. Your father, that preacher's boy, they're still holding sway in places folk are too scared to speak. If you testify, maybe we can end it." The weight of his words pressed hard. To speak would mean opening every wound, reliving every cruelty. I feared that if I dragged the past out, it would drag me back with it, strip away the strength I'd clawed together. That night, I sat by the fire, Hope asleep in her cradle, Seth whittling, Rurk sharpening his knife. My hands trembled as I spoke the fear aloud. "What if it breaks me?" Rurk looked up, steady, unflinching. "You're stronger than what broke you." Seth's knife paused mid-cut. His eyes met mine, filled with something like pride. "June, if you can stand, others will. Maybe you're the one who has to." Their faith steadied me more than my own. The next week, I rode down the mountain and stood before men who had never cared to hear a woman's voice. I spoke of ropes cutting into my wrists, of being traded like livestock, of the silence that nearly killed me. My voice shook, my tears fell, but I did not stop. When it was over, the preacher's son was named wanted. My father hunted and brought to justice. Laws began to shift, whispers turning into words of change. I returned home spent, hollowed, but also filled with something fierce. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was shaping what came after. And when Rurk brushed his thumb across my knuckles, that carved ring between us, I knew the girl they had cast out was gone. The woman who remained had claimed her place, and nothing would unmake that again. Years have a way of slipping by without notice until one day you look up and realize how much has changed. Hope's small cries turned into laughter, then into questions, and soon enough into the stubbornness of a girl who could ride a pony bareback before she was tall enough to braid her own hair. Seth grew into the kind of man Father never was, steady, kind, protective, without cruelty. The mountain shaped us all, and in its shadow, we found something none of us had known before: peace. Rurk grew older, though I swore for years he was carved of the same wood as the pines. His hair turned white at the edges, his gait slowed, but his hands never lost their strength when they wrapped around mine. He never became a man of many words, but when he did speak, I listened like it was scripture. The day came, though, when the mountain asked him back. He didn't rage against it. He sat on the porch in the last autumn light, carving one final figure, a bear, small enough for Hope to fit in her palm. He pressed it into her hand and gave her the only advice he'd ever spoken more than once: don't run. That night, he lay down by the fire and never rose again. Grief hollowed me, sharp and raw, but it didn't break me. I buried him beneath the tallest pine overlooking the valley, the same place where he'd once pointed out how the snowmelt fed the river. We laid stones in a careful pile, Seth and I, while Hope wept into my skirts. I wept too, but through the tears came gratitude. Rurk had not been given to me like chains. He had chosen us, protected us, built something that would outlive him. The seasons kept turning. Seth took over the traps. Hope grew bold enough to wander the ridges on her own, and I found myself teaching her the same lesson life had carved into me. The past may haunt, but it doesn't have to own you. Sometimes at night I dream of that first day, of being dragged into the snow with wrists raw and hope nearly gone. But when I wake, the dream fades, and I hear the crackle of the fire, the laughter of my daughter, the quiet strength of the family Rurk gave me the courage to claim. I am no longer the girl who was cast out. I am the woman who remained. The mountain holds my grief, yes, but it also holds my triumph, my love, my legacy. And when my time comes, I know I will leave behind more than silence. I will leave behind the proof that broken things can still build something whole.